Welcome to Yachting International Radio. You're with Karine from The Crew Coach on your mental health. Today I have head chef Kurt with us, who is going to address some important topics that we feel that you all should know about: substance abuse within the industry, mental health, bullying, suicide, all those subjects that we tend not to talk about. So welcome, Kurt. Thank you for joining me all the way from Thailand.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Excellent. So when did you first come into contact with the super yacht industry, and why did you decide to join it?
I basically got involved into the super yacht industry back in 1984 when I was working in restaurants in Annapolis, Maryland, and the boat show, the International Boat Show, came through, and I met some people at the bar there that were doing the yachting thing and telling me about the white sand beaches, palm trees, and beautiful women, and they were all headed to the Caribbean. And I was struggling through university, not quite focused, and I thought this could be an example for me to kind of run off, play the Peter Pan.
Okay, so what do you think personally, if you feel comfortable in sharing with me, what was your escapism? When you mentioned Peter Pan, what were you running away from?
Back in those days, I had more of a propensity to drugs, alcohol, and those were a few of my favorite things. And it kind of overshadowed my educational. So the concept of law school was getting a little bit dimmer, the vision of law school and this thing about yachting. And, I was a trained chef. My father was in the restaurant business. He was a restaurateur from Switzerland. So I grew up in the restaurant business. So I had the experience, and I met a few people in yachting that says, well, if you can cook, we can teach you how to sail. And within a couple of weeks, I was in Mexico on a beautiful sailboat sailing through the South Pacific.
Okay, so now you mentioned that you had a propensity for substance abuse. Now, in an industry that's rife with substance abuse, how did you cope or manage with that?
I fit in beautifully back then because it was, when I joined the first boat, they were like, here's the beer, here's the booze, the food, and we're chasing the sun. And back then in the 80s, we're talking the mid-early 80s, this was what the lifestyle was. I was on a boat called Leonora. It was a beautiful Swan 76, and we had t-shirts made up, the Leonora School of Water Sports and Alcoholism. Wow. And little did I know back then that I was a prophet, because literally that's where it took me. It was a great way to escape from reality, the whole party atmosphere. This is what the life was like. Now, of course, it's changed now over the years, now that yachts have gotten bigger and the professional side of things and the requirements and all the laws and regulations have changed a little bit. But I feel, and from my own experience of watching around the industry, that it's still there. It's just being shadowed and pushed to the side, not really addressed now.
So did you have a defining moment for you when you thought, okay, this is enough? This is not conducive to my well-being?
Yeah, I mean, I was blessed with the fact that, I had been running and gunning hard, and the people that had knew me back then know the type of person I was. And literally, I was on a boat that I'm presently on now, 18 and a half years ago. And, I got to a point within my own addictions that I reached out and asked for help. I had hit a so-called bottom, on the island of Bequia, and went back to my captain and, said, look, I started using again and drinking again. I didn't know what to do, but I knew I had to get some help. And what happened with me was the manager of our boat that I've known for a long time happened to be in recovery. And basically he gave me the option. He said, look, we've talked with the owners. Option A was, we're going to fly you to Florida. We're going to put you in a treatment center. We're going to give you a couple weeks used to a 12-step program, and we're going to keep your job for you. Or you can go out and do whatever you think you got to do. And back then, with my ego and everything, I wasn't an option A kind of guy. But I knew this guy, and I knew he was true, and there was some hope there. And I took them up on their offer, and that was, 18 and a half years ago. So I'm very open in the industry now with, being a member of the yachting community in recovery. I'm pretty open with that. If people need help or want to reach out, I'm open and I'm there.
Curious, I've got a few questions around that. The first is, if you don't mind sharing, how old were you when you asked for help or approached your captain?
I was 39.
39, okay. So your obviously career was flourishing, and my background, obviously working in the mental health field as a counselor and running groups specifically for men in substance abuse within the prison system. I know how much they told me how difficult it is to ask for help, and they use substances or legal substances to mask the underlying pain. So it's a form of self-medication. So for you, was that really challenging to get to a point to reach out for help and ask for it? And what would your advice be for men? Just because you're a male, I think there's females are more comfortable with, on a whole, it's a generalization, but asking for help. So what would you advise someone who's thinking about asking for help, but that shame and guilt is holding them back?
Yeah, I think in the beginning, little clues were given to me, people saying, well, if you think you might have a problem, which obviously I did, but it had to come from within, and I literally started to see my own truth, that life was getting to be out of control. I was very successful in yachting and cooking, and the community looked the other way. I was very successful. I was very good at what I did, so we'll look the other way on this. He could produce, so we'd look the other way on this. But that got smaller and smaller and smaller. And I got to a point within myself that, I realized that I could not drink or use, no matter how much I tried. I was trying to do it on myself, my own, but I could not drink. I could not use. And I got to this point where, basically there was an inner side within myself of saying, I need help.
Yeah.
And I share this openly. My experience was when I hit this bottom, that I laid into my bunk that night and I curled up in a ball and I said, God, I don't know what to do. Help me. And if you knew me back then, I wasn't a God guy. That was definitely not me. I was self-will run riot. And within 8 hours, I had that legal pad with the manager saying, we've got some help for you if you want it, and then I accepted that help, and then the journey started.
Yeah. Did you fear that you were going to lose your job by approaching your captain about it?
I think at that point, I had really resigned myself to the fact that I needed help, and when I came to him and I said, I have to go away, I don't know what I have to do, but I know I need to address this. And that was basically that unconditional, I need help, I'm done. That gift of desperation, I think, which every addict or alcoholic or somebody in mental trauma needs to do. You need to get to that point, that you're that desperation.
Yes. And there was another point that was coming to me when you were talking. Hopefully it will come back to me. Yes, that's it. So I know crew have told me that when they refrain or make it clear that they want to abstain from alcohol, there's more peer pressure to drink. And the crew go, come on, just have one. You're so boring. Have some fun. So that sort of pressure. Did you experience that? And what is your advice in terms of setting healthy boundaries to manage that?
Yeah, I think, I was blessed with the fact that I had a supportive crew. There was all the dogmas about going away, and I went to rehab, and I came back from that and joined the boat, and the people saw that I was struggling. I think, people that really truly see that struggle, which you went through, they respected that, kind of an amusing story is as I was coming back to join the boat in St. Thomas, and I was walking down the dock, and we were in Crown Bay Marina, and there's a bar right there that usually has on a red billboard what bands are playing that Wednesday night. And as I'm walking down the dock, I look at the bar, and it was "Welcome Back, Kurt." And I
No.
was like, holy shit. And the first thing the ego did was, oh my God, everybody knows,
Yeah.
you know, and this shame, guilt, remorse, and whatever. And at the end of it, it wasn't, nobody in my crew told anybody what I was up to. They just said I was away taking care of some personal business. And truly, what I found, and it's really true, that if you're truly have an issue with drugs or alcohol, people don't pay attention to you. That's in your head. I go out to the bars with my crews, and I'll buy them rounds of drinks or whatever. And I drink, but I drink soda,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
and, people really don't pay attention that I'm not drinking. They're doing their own thing,
Yeah.
you know,
Same. So,
but that's a process too.
yeah. And you mentioned warning signs. So you started to perhaps see that you were unraveling and losing a hold on things before you reached out for help. So knowing what you know now and your experience, what would you say the telling warning signs are amongst the crew who are starting to slip and maybe needing to ask for help and realizing they do have a problem with substance abuse?
Well, I think, some of those things that are the telltale one is that I became very emotionally charged, you
Mm,
know, very emotionally reclused also. The addiction side of things would be consistent all the time, watching those behaviors, watching the people disappear and pull back from interaction, or from the smallest little telltale of some drama on the boat, that there's an emotional charge which is like tenfold. you
yes.
know Something's charging them so much, and I find that, when I see that now, that, there's an opportunity to be of help,
Mm,
you know because, you can see it through the way people interact, the people coming back super late, hiding what they've been doing, that they're just, when you can't control the emotional nature, when you can't control your job, your quality of performance, that starts to snowball, you
yeah.
know, and it becomes so self-evident. And it usually, before anybody's there to even give any help, it's usually too late. They've walked themselves out of the job.
Mm,
I was very blessed that somebody came up to me and said, hey, we've got some help here if you want it,
yeah.
you know
We're very lucky. So I
and,
believe,
and I think it go ahead, I'm sorry.
no, you go ahead.
Like, we've discussed before that there's no training within this industry for people to see those telltale signs. I think, everybody's so consumed with climbing the ladder, so to speak, to get to that next position, than to really look at what's going on in the situation, whether it's substance abuse, whether it's psychological abuse, some type of trauma.
Mm,
Bullying is a huge, huge issue in yachting,
mm, mm,
that doesn't get addressed, that
mm,
gets looked the other way.
mm.
And I find it's one of those things that pushes people to a point where, they have no recourse to come back to.
Yeah, they feel like there's no way out. And you're right.
Yeah.
Look, we're in an industry that focuses strictly on obviously service, but safety. And that's why we do the SDCW 95. And why, if safety is such a big feature, why isn't psychological safety addressed?
I totally agree, and we've discussed this before, and it's one of the things that I bring up, and I think it won't be implemented unless the IMO comes down and puts regulations involved with this. But I find it really interesting that we all have to take this STCW. We all pay for this. We all have to have it. We all have to renew it. And that we practice and we train. We're going through the STCW for sea survival, for firefighting, for first aid. and then for social responsibilities. And then when we go back to the boat, it's regulated that we need to drill on firefighting, first aid, sea survival, but not social responsibility.
Mm.
There's nothing. There's no, and I get asked, and I present this question a lot to people in the industry, is why not? Why do we even bother taking it then? We spend and we sit there and waste our 2 or 3 hours going through all the litany of BS, and then we don't train on it. We say, oh, yes, this is so important, and then we don't train on it, and I've been approached by people who said, well, how would you train on something like that? And I'm saying, well, you have these scenarios in firefighting that there's a fire in the engine room. What's the scenario? There's a fire in the galley. What's the scenario for each person? How about there's a bullying incident on the boat? What is the scenario? What is the recourse? What does that person have to do to report this or get some protection from that?
Exactly.
And that's not done.
Mm.
That's not done. And that can, usually that bullying happens with somebody that's got some other issues going on.
Yeah.
And it,
That's absolutely right. And I think it's also about recognizing the warning signs. So if someone is being bullied, how's that going to impact their mental health, and how their behavior is going to change subsequently because of that bullying behavior. And you'll notice isolation, withdrawal, they may be drinking more. There's a whole range of signs that you will see when someone has been subject to bullying, sexual assault, all those unhelpful behaviors or inappropriate behaviors.
yeah, absolutely. And, that goes into suicide.
Yeah.
That goes into self-harm, and if people, get pushed to that thing, I mean, you're way outside of the box then before containing or even addressing something like that, to realize that there are people who have certain psychological stuff, and not to diminish depression, anxiety, fear, bipolar disorder. These are things that happen, and a majority of people within the industry have that. I'm a firm believer that, people that join yachting aren't the bastion of mental health anyway. Most of them are running from something, or it's just a quick way to make some money to run through. And there's not that essence within themselves of, this is what my occupation is. I've had to see that for myself. This is what I do. I've been in yachting for, 35 years. I've been on the boat that I'm on right now for 21 years. That's kind of unheard of in yachting, but you can gain a different perspective, as you've grown into this.
Yes.
But it's definitely a big problem.
Yeah. And we discussed before about crew longevity, and you've obviously have managed to successfully attain that within your employment. Now, I'm a firm believer that if we take care of our crew and support their needs, their well-being needs, it's more likely for them to stay employed for a lot longer, because they feel like they're a part of a family. And with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the need for belonging is one of those fundamental needs. So what are we doing? What responsibilities are we taking to make people feel safe and feel like they belong to part of a family? Because you are coexisting together, you're living and working together.
Yeah, when we spoke about this before, and I know this kind of ruffles some feathers, but this whole concept of, doing training with this, I feel that as boats get bigger, and people are stepping up the ladder, so to speak, in terms of new position, whether it's on deck, to the bosun, to the first mate, to the captain, moving to bigger yachts. And what I find now is you'll have people that are on these larger yachts, and this is just one focus of it, because from what I've understood in the super yacht industry, the big talk right now, the big problem is crew attrition. The crew turnover is so big now, and it's almost like, yeah, that's what it is. And I don't buy that. I think there's got to be a common denominator here. And I kind of see that, in years past, captains work their way up running smaller boats, gaining experience running larger boats and larger boats. And with that gains the crew experience of crew dynamics, fundamentals of being a leader, and I think that starts to diminish now on larger boats where you have people taking their courses and getting their captain's license and everybody's working up, but they've never really had any practical experience about what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when you get to a point where you're that high up, that you need to understand that you've got no practical experience in this, in dealing with a crew, and that just been given the keys to a 70-meter boat. The captain's going home with his wife, and you're in charge of the show, and that's a hell of a responsibility with safety of the crew, safety of the vessel. And then all of a sudden you have some bullying incident. I recently knew of a situation where, the chief engineer on one of these boats was very much having a confrontation to a point where it almost became physical with another male crew member. And because he was such a strategic member of the crew, they blew it off and kept blowing it off until, the threat of bringing the police in made them act. And that's, if it's constantly be pushed aside, and if this is just one instance, how much of that kind of stuff is going on within the junior crew?
It's just bubbling. So you mentioned suicide. Have you, and I know it is increasing within the industry, have you been aware of any suicides while you've been working on board?
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of intimately involved with one guy who committed suicide, and this was back in the better days of drugs and alcohol in my yachting career, where a guy that I'd been out with 3 days before, and he was kind of a heavy hitter. He was a big partier, that some stuff went down, and basically 2 days later they found him hanging himself.
So, because you were hanging out with him a few days beforehand, did you notice any changes within him?
No.
Yeah.
And I've had, experience with that in the recovery side of things, where I've had, 5 or 6 very close people commit suicide.
Wow.
And it's a real deal thing. It's final.
Yeah.
And it's usually the people that don't reach out.
That's it. That's just what
that end up doing it.
Yeah. It just highlights how important it is to reach out for help. It's actually a sign of courage and strength. It is not a sign of weakness.
Absolutely. And I think changing these things within a community like this and realizing that it's a major deal, within the whole concept of lowering crew turnover, setting boundaries. For owners, they don't want to keep learning new people's names and knowing that this other person just costing them $5,000 or $6,000, and then they're not going to see the person again. And they've got to start asking the question, why is this happening? You've got to start asking that question, why is that happening? And then you get to a point where, change, and changes, I love talking about change because change is very difficult. I was in a group setting where the discussion was how painful change is, and everybody was explaining how painful change is in their life, in their personal life or professional life, and then one guy finally, who was the leader of this talk, he goes, I hate to disagree with everybody. There is absolutely no pain involved in change. It's the resistance to change that is painful to us. We change all the time. Where's the resistance to change in this?
And it's holding onto old beliefs that you think are serving you, and it's keeping you in your so-called comfort zone, and you don't realize what's out there once you let go of that, and the better life that you can have for yourself once you do, because you've clearly proven that you were in a realm of drugs and alcohol that you thought was serving you, until you got to a point that you were motivated enough to make that change for yourself. And it's having that
absolutely
that you need to change. If without the self-awareness, there will be no change.
Absolutely. You know, you get to a point in my little take on belief. You know, if you're on a situation on a boat or wherever, you know, and I believe one thing and you believe another thing, and if you go down to the essence of that belief, all the way down to the bottom, basically you don't know. This is just what you believe. And my thoughts now are to the point where, why can't it be, you know, I know from my own experience of what I know, and what I don't know, I don't know. And it's only from that position of I do not know that I'm going to be able to grow.
Yes.
You know, if I'm constantly throwing this stuff that my beliefs and how I've got to be, and this is the show and blah, 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 you know, I'm going to lose every time. You know, the one thing I know for sure in myself is that I don't know everything. As a chef, that is my potential for growth.
I love that.
You know, where I'm myself,
Yeah.
you know, and that has given me the longevity of dealing with, you know, stuff that happens, you know, changes that occur, you know, I might not agree with it, but it's just like, whatever.
Yeah.
You know,
I love that.
open and to out.
Yeah. That's such an important statement and belief system. And I think going back to leadership, it's almost the fear of the unknown in terms of how do I lead people, how do I manage people, that the people of rank go, I don't want to know about the drama, not my problem, you sort it out. And it's because they have fear. They don't have the skills in order to manage it. And the people of junior rank look up to their leaders and go, please help me, you should know, you've got the stripes, you know, like it's a real internal conflict, I would say.
Yeah, and it's also, I think too, is realizing you know that, you know, I kind of take the position where I look at everybody, and you know, everybody's got their own stuff, and everybody's got their own movie going on, you know. And if I'm constantly looking at, you know, I can look at the people that are above or in the industry or the industry leaders, realizing that, you know what, they all got their own stuff going on, you know. And, you know, when you get to a point where you're more healthy, you know, being able to be a leader or be somebody that can come and sit and listen to somebody, you know. And part of that comes, I mean, for me, and I just speak for myself only, and, you know, people that know me now, you know, I'm not the same person that I used to be. You know, I'm a person that's got a set, you know, I'm into the mindfulness deal. I'm into the meditation. I'm into the prayer. I'm into sitting, you know, I'm into exercise. I'm into, you know, being healthy. And from all that, I explode into what I'm doing. I have more energy, you know. You know, my practice starts when I'm working, you know, my practice starts at 4:10 in the morning, no matter what I'm doing, you know. And I have this,
what is your practice?
that incorporate my practice, you know, I get up, I have a cup of coffee, I sit, then I go and I have 30 minutes of meditation and prayer. Then I have an hour of training, and then I'm showered and I'm back up in the galley by 6 a.m. And I mean, that's what I do for years. But I've been doing that for a long time. So it becomes a natural part of my working life. You know, and I find that through that, my relationships, whether it's my relationships at home with my wife or my colleagues, you know, or my friends, that, you know, I can be present. You know, I think a lot of that gives me the ability to, you know, understand that what's going on right now, if I'm present in what's going on in my job, in my personal relationship, I've got a way better chance of dealing with things successfully. But if I'm constantly in fear, you know, or depression of living what was, you know, what happened before, I'm going to lose. You know, I'm definitely not going to win here. You know, and I think part of that has to do with, you know, I think people grow into some things like that and some don't. You know, I find that for myself, this is not just about being in the industry. You know, it's like people say, you know, well, what do you do for a living? You know, just like, you know, I try to live. You know, I'm present. what do I do for money? Oh, I'm a chef on a private yacht.
Yeah. So
You know, but I bring that with me.
Yeah. Your practice is the core of who you are and what you do.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I do have one last question for you. I know that drugs do not discriminate. However, working as a chef, there are added pressures, and it's almost like you're on the clock 24/7, preparing meals when they are requested. Do you feel that chefs are more inclined to use cocaine to manage their responsibilities on board?
I think for the people that are involved with that, because if you step out of the yachting industry into the restaurant business, you know, into the hospitality industry, you know, the use of cocaine and other mind-altering drugs, it's prevalent, you know, and that gets brought into a situation. You know, this is something that's really not looked. It's very much frowned upon within yachts or boats or whatever, but it's there, you know, and whether, you know, and I was one of those guys, you know, and I know it didn't benefit me whatsoever. You know, it basically took it out of me, you know, to the point it brought me to my knees quicker.
Yeah.
You know, it definitely brought me to my knees quicker. I think it was a catalyst to get me into the recovery side of things. But I mean, it's there, but it's not with everybody. I mean, I know plenty of guys that I'm friends with in the industry that, you know, this is not their deal. They're just truly professionals, you know, but I think that they still run into the mental health issues because the ego is there, or they're professionals and they're dealing with people that quote unquote aren't as professional as they wish to have.
Yes.
You know, and that turns into be the tiger chasing its tail.
Yeah.
And turns into their demise. You know, I see a lot of people that are holding these jobs on these great jobs for 6 months, a year, and people are thinking that that's normal, and I don't believe it needs to be normal.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, some interesting content there. Thank you so much, Kurt. And I really love the fact that you've highlighted that your practice is your everlasting high rather than tapping into substance abuse. I think that's beautiful.
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining me on Yachting International Radio. I think what you have to say is going to make a massive impact. So thank you again.
Thank you very much for having me.